Okay, start recording. Let's get down to it.
Yes, hello. Liz
Hello.
Bernstein, or would you like to go professionally as Elizabeth Bernstein?
I think so.
Maybe you could give me like a brief bio of who you are, what you're doing, where you are.
Well, right now, like many in humanity, I'm in my house 24 hours. I mean, I go in the backyard, I go on the front, but I'm in my house. And basically, I'm not sure what I did beforehand. I'm not sure what I'll do afterwards. But right now, my life is very much quarantine focused. But I was /am, and that's like a hint.
Future
about an insanity hint. It's anyway a lecturer at SFAI, San Francisco Art Institute, and for about 10 years, and then I just closed this September, if one can believe it, Royal Nonesuch Gallery, project art space in Oakland, which you, Sarah Thibault, were a co-director of for probably 2 years or so. And I have a kid. And
just to recap, your house that you're in all times is based in Oakland.
Yes, I'm in Oakland.
Okay, cool. I feel like that's important information for people.
Oakland, California, which is very close to San Francisco, but different.
Yeah. And so your main job before all this was professor at San Francisco Art Institute of photography. And then you're an artist yourself, of course. You were co-founder of Royal Nonesuch Gallery for 10 years. You randomly, not related, decided to close it in the fall. How lucky do you feel about that? That's really good.
I mean, that was good. It was both good timing and also really like, what is happening? But yeah, good timing.
You mean that big life change of closing the gallery?
Well, with closing the gallery and then SFAI closing and then having a quarantine, it's a lot of like, that chapter went boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, like you are done with all those things that you know.
Yeah, it was a lot of chapters closing in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I feel like that's an experience that a lot of people can really connect to right now. Like their lives as they know it is done and changed. And as someone whose life always operates in that way, like I feel like my life doesn't change slowly. It changes like rapid. Like you don't have a job and a house all of a sudden. Like that can be really traumatic. And how do you feel like when you just moved? So speaking of houses.
I just moved. I finally, after like my entire life of being like, it would be so great to live with friends. I live in a duplex, and so my son and I live in the bottom apartment, and then my oldest best friend live with her wife and their 2 kids live in the top apartment. So we have a bit of like a
a COVID community that you can.
We have a little bit of a community going on.
That's cool. Has that helped since you started sheltering in place to have that built?
Oh my gosh, I'm sure everybody has said that like they're grateful. Well, that's not true. I've heard it's hard to be 24/7 with somebody if you have a tough relationship. This is a particularly good scenario because we have space. We don't actually live in the same house, but they have 2 boys who are 4 and 6. I have 1 boy who's 5. So for that reason, I mean, and there's other ones, but for that reason, like being able to blend the 3 kids is amazing. I legitimately do not know what I would do if I was responsible for my child's entire like entertainment.
Right.
Companionship.
Because you're co-parenting, but you're ultimately a single parent right now. Is that?
I'm a single parent. I mean, Langston is with his dad 1 day a week, and bless them, they have a wonderful relationship. 1 day a week and 1 evening a week.
Learn about it in the New Yorker.
Yeah, as many did. Fred did a New Yorker cartoon of our co-parenting in the pandemic.
Yeah, and it seemed like he spoke very highly of it. So it's a good sign that, you know, both parties seem pretty happy with the arrangement.
Yeah, we're actually in a really good point. Like we communicate well, things are going well, but I would not say, I mean, and he would not say either. It's not 50-50.
Yeah.
There's the brunt, there's the CEO of the operations. And
yeah, right. Mom. Head bitch in charge is mom.
Yeah, exactly.
So I feel like there's a lot of things that I want to kind of ask you about because like you have a really like kind of multifaceted, challenging life anyway, but then I think COVID kind of throws it into the gears. So like maybe like we could start talking about working at SFAI and then not working at SFAI. My question, and I did a little research, was like, why the timing? Like people are graduating, people need their jobs. Not that much has changed from 1 month to the next. Like why now kind of thing? Like why not finish out the semester? But maybe you have insight into that.
So the students are finishing the semester.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah, they are. They're doing online, like I'm paid through the end of the semester. We're doing online learning, which makes so much sense at an art school. Makes no sense. We are, so we are set through the end of the semester. But I mean, I really have, as the saying goes, no more F's to give about SFAI. I am just like, you know, like put a fork in her, she done. Type of thing with it. I mean, it's insane. So everybody has their point of view. Everybody has like where they come from. So this is just from my experience. So I've been, do you want me to like get in like to the nitty gritty a little?
As much as you want. Yeah, I would love to hear your insight because I feel like I'm getting the mass produced messaging, and even the New York Times article that I found felt like it was put together by the PR team. Like it didn't talk to anyone that I know is really active from the like teacher side. So it's like, what is really going on? And I like missed the town hall the other night. So I would love for you to enlighten me.
So I'm, you know, I know a lot because I've been part of the community. There are people who know more. So for example, like not to name names, but like Kate Rhodes is like on the bargaining committee with union. So like there's people who definitely are like different levels of knowledge.
I'm talking to Daniel Lawrence on Monday. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I can't wait to hear that podcast.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you know, you tell your side, we'll get multifaceted.
So, you know, there's kind of the PR history of SFAI that is very real, which I fully believe in, which is like innovative space, artists create, multidisciplinary, multi-thoughtdisciplinary, you know, like that's not a word, but everybody knows what I mean.
But it could be.
It could be. And that's real. Like it is an incredibly dynamic, beautiful, weirdo space. Like that's real.
No, that's why I went there for undergrad. Like I can be experimental here. That seems really creative and cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally real. So I know. So having taught there as an adjunct, it's a shit show. I mean, the teaching is amazing. The students are amazing. Honestly, naming names with Lindsay coming in as chair, that has been amazing. Like she has, that's the word amazing, like 7 times. But what has never happened historically is, you know, you're part of a department. So that would mean you know other people in your department. There's some sense of who's a supervisor, who's parallel to you, who's tracking you, who is, you know, in some ways caring for the larger picture. And I would say that definitely until Lindsay came along, you were a total ninja. Like you would come in to teach, you would find out you taught because you got an email. let's say you didn't get an email. That's how you found out you didn't teach. There was no like transparency about, does anybody read my course evaluation? There was just no sense of anybody paying attention to anything going on, or
like career development. Like they're not nurturing their teachers to become
even that language is like too much. Like it was like I don't know if anybody knew who I was, let alone like nurture a career. Okay, so that was insane. When the union came along, the school went balls to the wall to try to bust the union. I mean, there was email after email after email being like, if you guys let this union in, the spirit of who we are is gonna die. And I was like, really? Because it kind of seems like I would love healthcare, all that kind of stuff that makes unions fun and awesome. I mean,
that was one of the things that you were asking for as a union was healthcare, and they were
that's too pie in the sky. But like we were asking for like a contract.
Wow.
So like it basically the way it had been was like you find out that you are teaching maybe 6 weeks before the semester, maybe 2 weeks before the semester, maybe it's just totally random. Who's deciding what classes run? Who knows? And basically, the union was like, let's have people get like year-long contracts based on seniority and pay raises and, and I mean, they literally like did an email barrage and then meetings where they would kind of be like, why don't you one-on-one meet with like the president and like 4 other people in the admin by yourself, which is not a feel-good situation, So that's not like an open dialogue situation.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm just gonna can I do a little more SFAI?
Yeah, go for it.
You sure? Okay.
Yeah.
So there was always that sense. And then from the student side, the students also felt like they were kind of like 2nd tier, 3rd tier priorities. And this divide between admin and faculty was pretty intense. And then the students really felt that. And they felt like their needs and concerns were also, 2nd tier compared to what the admin's needs and concerns were for themselves as an institution.
Right.
So then, Fort Mason comes along and the school like expands and expands and expands and expands and expands into like literally the most showboat of a place. It's so beautiful. It's like art paradise. And even at the time I was like, this sounds insane. So what I think happened was they wound up going like $20 million into debt for that project on a projection of what tuition would be. But here's my little thing, just like business financials. Like, why would you have a setup with no endowment, a ton of debt, all your property basically leveraged, and then you pay your bills from tuition? Guys, no.
Like zero safety net.
Zero safety net. Literally, you're like waiting for be like, come on, FAFSA, like get it in.
Right.
So that I can pay my, no. That sounds insane to me.
Yeah. Well, and I think like on that note, they're like calling to alumni for volunteers. I'm sure they're doing this among the teachers too, but like for marketing support and like.
That is so crazy.
And I'm like, I paid you $100,000+ and I am done. That has ruined my whole financial life. So pretty much I gave you everything I have. You cannot have more. Like no more free time. I just like saw that email and I'm like, well, I'm sure there are people who don't feel like as financially like burdened by their experience at the school, but it was a really expensive school. So you're asking these people who are probably even more in debt than me, who went there for 4 years, for free labor, which just sounds insane to me, for their mismanagement,
Insane. insane. I mean, I was looking at those emails, and you know what? God bless the people who are actually typing these emails.
Totally.
This is not like
not against them.
This is not against them. This is like a framework management thing. I know there are good people who are sort of caught up in having to be part of that machine.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it sounded like it was like SFAI sent me this like booty call at like 4 a.m. to be like, if you have money, get in a Lyft right now. Come on over and let's Venmo. Like it sounds unhinged.
Yeah, I feel it. I agree. Like the scale of what they're actually asking is like, it's inappropriate to send a mass email about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like we could move on just because I don't want to burden Minnesota Street Project with our conversation in case that we've crossed the line at some point. But and I do want to get to some of the other really intense experiences that you're having, you know, as part of the COVID crisis.
Do you get to edit at all?
I can, yeah, definitely. So if we need to, we can do that.
Okay.
But so I did want to ask you, because your son has diabetes, and I think everyone's worst nightmare right now is having to go to the hospital or having to deal with some kind of external or non-COVID medical issue while COVID's going on. So I don't know if you could tell us a little bit, like, what has been going on with your like traditional routine and how that might have shifted, or like the level of anxiety that has, I'm sure, been raised because of this.
About the diabetes specifically?
Yeah, well, just, you know, because he's still kind of learning how to manage it. He's pretty young, right?
Oh, yeah, he doesn't do any of the management. That's all me or Fred or another grown-up who's in charge of him.
Yeah.
Yes, having access to non-COVID related medical care has definitely been something that I am like, oh my God, what do we do if he goes into DKA, if he, you know, needs something very serious, very immediate? I feel fortunate that we are, you know, UCSF Children's Hospital is right here. And, you know, they're leaders in the medical field for kids. And I'm forever grateful that we have access to that. There are people who are a lot more isolated already with diabetes management. And, you know, maybe they have to drive an hour, maybe 2 hours. And then that one particular hospital isn't dedicated to kids, so they're overrun with COVID. We're in a better situation than other people. I would say that the fact, I mean, I'm like knocking on wood, but the fact that, you know, all of the news is like, it doesn't hit children as hard is the only reason I'm like not like crawling on the ceiling right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, if that was true.
No,
yeah.
That is, I mean, we take our quarantine seriously. Like, we are not playing around with the quarantine.
Yeah.
The mail gets sprayed. The, you know, the shoes come off, the gloves come off, the N95s come off, which we had a couple from fire season. We, like, our groceries get wiped down before they come in. Like, we are in full, like,
detail-oriented cleansing.
Very detail-oriented quarantine. We don't see other people. The kids don't go out. Our kind of rule is like, if you have to drive there to do it recreationally, then that's not really quarantine for us. There's different flexibilities.
I see. So being in the car is like kind of a middle ground, I suppose, because you're by yourselves, but.
Well, it just sort of like, what does quarantine mean? And for us, it has meant that like, you don't get in the car to do your recreation. So like, if you're going to a beach or going to, like, quarantine means at home fundamentally. Now that being said, we have a huge backyard. If I didn't have a huge backyard, I would have to shift my definition of quarantine.
Yeah, because you definitely have to be aware of like the mental health impact and Yeah. And are people like walking around outside? I've heard from a couple people that people do like loops around the lake or,
Well, within society, there are subsets of people who do different things. So, my reality is sort of reflected back to me and the people I'm communicating with. And then I'm sure same is true for other people who are quarantining in different ways. There's very little car traffic. Like most people, when they're on walks, they are social distancing. So you see a lot of like friend pairs where like one person's on the sidewalk and one's in the middle of the street, and they're kind of, walking parallel. You see like, I've stayed away from Lake Merritt because I think that's like the people who are feeling a little more lax are going to Lake Merritt.
Yeah. And they don't have someone who's an at-risk group, or even if Langston is fine, like you going to the hospital for him would put you at risk and, complicate things. So I feel like in a way you're at risk.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I do not trust fully. Now, type 1 and type 2 diabetes are different. So like when the media is like diabetes and COVID, what they're more directly talking to is people who have compromised
Like
immune system because of type 2, that their body is challenged to work as efficiently as if they didn't have type 2. Type 1 is a little different. With that being said, nobody knows what the overlap is, and type 1 always puts you into a high risk category, so it would for this too. Yeah. So yeah.
Got it.
Mama's uptight is really.
Yeah, I think you're doing the right thing by being overly cautious. Yeah. So one of the other things I wanted to talk to you to kind of segue into like mental health and like, not being so strict that you kind of lose your mind, but then also thinking about, any pre-existing situations. And you are a longtime sober person. And I was wondering kind of for you, but also people who are kind of maybe dealing with more recent, like substance abuse issues, like, have you been kind of researching like how to manage that while in quarantine, or like, do you have any advice for people who might be kind of dealing with that right now? Because I'm sure even people who aren't considering themselves to be like an addict are like dealing with some more like obsessive thoughts and just boredom.
Yeah. I think it definitely depends on where you are in your recovery story, basically. Like, I do feel like this is like real talk, that if this were the time that I was trying to get sober and it was basically the directive was to like stay home alone, and remove all external structure.
Yeah.
I mean, my heart is with people who are in that situation, because that is hard. I mean, the fundamental thing you do in early recovery is get involved with every single structure that will support sobriety, which is a lot of externals, because individually, one's own choice would be to not be sober.
Right.
So
like
you have, whether it's rehab or meetings or talking to sober people or going for a walk, getting out, just all of these therapy and, all of this stuff. It's the opposite of stay home alone.
Right.
So, I think that is something that, like, when this is done, the people who are in that situation will be able to speak really directly to that experience. I would.
Oh no, you just froze. Okay, you're back. Yeah.
Can't remember. Oh, so from the perspective of more of like a maintaining sobriety person rather than like an entering sobriety person.
Yeah.
I would say that the challenges are not like to drink or not to drink or to, it's not like that, but there are specific mental health challenges that I feel like, well, I mean, I can just talk directly to myself, but this is something I see. Like, people who are addicts have a tendency to have other underlying vulnerabilities, so maybe depression or OCD or definitely eating disorders, or, you know, all different kinds of sort of maladapted self-soothing mechanisms for one reason or another. And so when you're at home 24 hours a day and your external structures get taken away, regardless of if it leads to substances, of course, it's a highly vulnerable time to start to keep yourself afloat from like the mental health demons, I should say, which is kind of a silly way to say it, but it's hard.
Yeah, like I get what you're saying. And I think because it's hard for people who are like with their family and never had like mental health challenges, so to speak, ever. You know, I hear my like mom friends who've never been to therapy, like kind of just expressing like extreme frustration with their situation. And then if you add onto it like a history of triggers or, you know, whatever, yeah, I think it's hard for everybody, but especially it's like a different kind of at-risk population in a way.
You know, but now that I'm saying that out loud, I would say that like I have a particular like resiliency about managing.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not including you necessarily in the.
Oh no, I'm thinking
you're like I'm looking to you as like the wise elder of the crew.
Like, no, but I do think that might be shared across like people who have some long-term sobriety, if you've also done work like on yourself.
Yeah.
You know, things have gotten pretty dark and you've had to do a lot of work to like stay involved in the world. So that is helpful to have had to know what it's like to like hit a wall and then kind of pull yourself back.
No, I would agree with that as someone who's done like a lot of therapy. I feel like, you know, not necessarily for substance abuse, but I think I'm like relying on tools that I've like taught myself over like the past, like however many years. And if you haven't kind of had to do that work before now, you might be caught like very unawares and like you don't necessarily have that conscious tool set. Like you've been able to manage because you're naturally, you know, learn certain things growing up or whatever. But now like, I feel like it takes more consciousness around like this situation really sucks. Like I need to choose how to feel instead of it being like a natural reaction, which is to feel terrible, you know?
100 million %. Yes. I think if you've sort of like been a like
had a good life.
Yeah. I'm like, how else is it? Yeah. I think this can be pretty blindsiding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on to happier topics, perhaps. Are you being like inspired at all by, as a photographer, you know, I think Zoom is like this new language, like a visual language. But there's other kind of things, like there's been some art projects where they're like recontextualizing work that was made before this time as, you know, how it reflects our new like quarantining shared experience. Are you finding any inspiration in your surroundings or like, is it kind of too soon to like know how you're processing your world visually?
Yes, I'm definitely not processing my world visually right now because the experience of being basically 24/7 with a 5-year-old is so all encompassing. And so like it takes a certain level of energy and it's not like a quiet reflective energy. And so I think that experience really makes it I need a certain amount of mental quiet to be able to just like reflect and participate in a sort of slower creative way. But when I have a moment, I just want to, you know, chill on Netflix. like
today. Yeah. So thank you for spending it not doing that.
No, but I mean, this is amazing because this is like connection.
Totally.
But I've also like slightly re-engineered my life in this time, and I've applied to graduate school, which is completely insane and bizarre for an MBA. Means that I've like taken this wild left turn because I'm just sort of like done.
So Zoe did tell me to ask you about your life plan.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, if it didn't become apparent what that was by our conversation. So that is cool. I can totally see that for you as kind of an entrepreneur. I think, you know, being an adjunct professor, you're like running your own ship, you know, you're not really part of an institution in the way like a more full-time role would be.
Yeah.
And then running the gallery.
Yeah, I'm looking. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. So yeah, tell me more about this. Like, when did that happen? What's going on?
Well, you know, with the collapse of everything, I just wanted to do like a reevaluation and what did I want to invest in moving forward, and kind of like the third wave of my like career, basically. You know, there's like early, middle, and like what's the one that's going to carry you through retirement. So I like the way you engage with thoughts and like philosophy and content. Like, you're such a creator of content. Like, it's amazing. Like, everything that you touch, you kind of like turn into this like beautiful bowl of content and serve it for us to like eat and metabolize and bathe in and think about. And, you know, it's a very concrete and profound way of translating just sort of average everyday life into something that is intentionally like growthful and dynamic and for a larger audience. And I love those conversations. It's just like my jam, but I'm not academic. I'm not like a theory person. I'm just not. And so I don't like want my PhD in the beauty of this type of content development. Like, I'd rather be part of the content development. And I have a couple of like bees in my bonnet of like sort of pivot points in culture that I really want to change. And so I feel like that's sort of a part of.
And you think that going through like mainstream culture maybe, or like the private sector, is kind of a way to do that without having to go through academia? Is that kind of what your thought was around the MBA?
Well, my thought around, it's a design MBA, which is sort of different than a MBA. Mm-hmm. So it's more like artsy people. So like, I guess you come up with the content and the visual, like you are the creative in your own thing. And I haven't done this yet. And I basically only researched it from the quarantine. So this is like your COVID project. I love it. This has been like my COVID project. But yeah, I think the idea of having different platforms to communicate to audiences with is really inspiring, and being able to create conversation that shifts how we feel about ourselves and our participation in the world.
Yeah, that sounds really inspiring. And I feel like if we all came out of COVID with that in our future, like that's the best we could ask for in some ways on an individual level. Like to have this new path, you know, like if the world's going to shut down all your past stuff, like that's pretty exciting.
I mean, I also feel like the nonprofit model, like I can't handle it. Anyway, the fundraising and the grants and the blah, blah, blah. Like I want to be part of a model that sustains itself. Like not for the force of evil, but I want to be like in a sustainability model, because the like sort of teach for peanuts and nonprofit martyr world and like God bless. It sounds like I'm dogging on that.
The like, martyr world. Yeah, no, there are enough people that want to do it who don't have 5-year-olds with diabetes too, and
Yes,
don't have
that's true.
extra needs. So I could see you wanting like a little bit more financial support, but also, you know, artists tend to feel like being compensated for their work, and I know I fall into this. It somehow makes them like the sellout, or that you're bad, or that your work isn't impactful in some way. But really, you're being rewarded for your ideas based on what people find neat, like important. You know, it's like they give you money because they find that you have value. I think as long
Yeah.
as you use that energy for good and don't practice like black magic with it, like we shouldn't feel guilty about it, you know?
Well, I mean, I really I agree with what you're saying, and I'm not disparaging nonprofits
Oh, not at
themselves
all.
or
Yeah,
people
no.
who work at nonprofits. I'm not. But the financial model of how they sustain themselves
Yeah,
is very hard.
right.
Um, that's my larger
Yeah,
point.
you're like, no shade on my nonprofit friends.
No, and no, I mean, no, and it's been my whole life. I've never worked in any other model,
Yeah,
never. So I'm just like sort of a little tired of that.
yeah, understandable. So to kind of wrap things up, I'm wondering if you have any like COVID recipes, or if you've done any COVID haircuts or anything to kind of keep yourself
Uh,
entertained.
yes, I
Oh,
have.
wow.
Hold on. I have to like flatten my bangs, but I did the COVID head shave right over there, which oh, and I dyed my hair
Yeah, I
red.
was wondering if your hair was a little more red.
Yep, it's a little more red. I
Very
think a
cute.
good pair of hair clippers and a box of hair dye is a wonderful coping strategy
Yeah.
when you are in a COVID situation.
Well, and I did a pixie cut on my roommate here, and like
Oh, oh
there's
yeah, I saw that.
yeah, and there's so many YouTube tutorials that if you're even slightly
Yeah,
visual, you can kind of follow
yeah.
it and you're fine. Like it's just like sculpt,
Oh yeah.
you know?
Yes,
Like no need to protest
100.
in the streets, people. Like do
I
your own
mean,
effing haircut.
stay home and cut your own goddamn hair. I agree. Um, wait, I want to wrap up with like one thought that has been permeating my
Oh,
head
absolutely.
since the quarantine began, and I'm realizing through this podcast interview that even though I've had no time for for it to come out visually, I think the creative juices have been going with more word-based thought rather than like making something that has a visual output. But I've slightly become, I think about this every day because I'm spending more time on my phone, spending more time scrolling. In my age bracket, mid 40s, every single thing I see is anti-aging, 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 anti-aging. Everything. I mean, I kid you not how much. Now, I am a person that likes a good face serum. I, you know,
You
I
like
like
the good
doing my
side.
part. I'm not like I'm into the glow.
Yeah, and like
Um,
you go to the dentist occasionally, as RuPaul would say.
exactly. So I've become slightly obsessed with this idea of a pro-aging movement, as opposed to an anti-aging movement, and a pro-aging movement totally distant from it just being like a refutation or repudiation of like being okay with looks. Like this is not about looks. This is about what it means to think about getting older in a very complex way. Because if I see the word anti-aging one more time, I'm just gonna, it sucks, man. Because if you're anti-aging, the only alternative you have is dying. A, and B, what I can't anti-age.
Well, and it
Can't.
also says like your years of experience are shameful. You know, like when we start telling people that getting older and looking older is bad, it means that you're not valuing the years of experience that they've accumulated. And like, we're without elders, you know, to represent a future that does not involve anti-aging, you know, like I feel like even like the people who are elders in the media right now are like kind of doing what you're talking about. And they're like, you know, trying to fit with media standards instead of representing, like, you know, who's the woman from Fargo who like clearly just like doesn't use anti-aging serums and like,
Oh yeah, Frances
McDormand, for example, like she is pro-aging and you can see her getting better as an actress with age and she's just being herself. And it's like, again, it doesn't mean that we should all go that route. You know, like I like to wear serums as well and whatever and sunscreen, but I feel like, yeah, it kind of takes away from the person and like the experience, and it focuses it all on like appearance and not reminding other people of death, you know. And
I also think this is kind of my, what am I saying? I also think that there is the narrative, like your 20s are wild and crazy, your 30s are you're figuring it out, your 40s you're just like a master's zen. And you know what? People go through shit in their 40s and they don't know who they are and they don't know what they want. Everything explodes and you have more skills to like get the train back on the tracks, and you have more skills to see things as part of a larger narrative than the end of the world.
right.
But not everybody in their 20s is a mess, and not everybody in their 40s is like a golden Buddha.
Right.
There is not room for us to have different complex experiences as part of the narrative of 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And that drives me crazy a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think this is great. I'm excited to see like where that goes. Sign me up. Are you doing any like cooking or anything? Oh,
okay.
Cool.
Oh, here you come back. Sorry, you froze.
Oh, sorry. So, yeah, I think it's been like an hour, and I know it cuts off at a certain amount of time.
Okay.
It might have been less. I was going to ask you about cooking.
Okay.
Okay, so let me start over. So are you doing any like COVID recipes? Like I know you're doing your own haircuts, but do you have any special treats that you've discovered while in quarantine?
So I do, and it's not this in the sweet world. And this is like, okay, so like everybody, or like many people, I did not cook that much beforehand. It was more of the special thing to like make a more complex meal. And this is a concept that has been around forever, and I realize I'm just getting onto it. But there's these things called spices, and they change the way things taste. Oh my God. So I have discovered, basically, beans are the hero of my cabinet.
Wait, did you just say beans?
Beans.
Me too. I love beans so much.
Beans are my hero. So I mush them down and make them into a creamy pasta sauce, which I never would have done before.
I need that recipe.
We'll put like just like chili seasonings on them and make them spicy, smoky. So that's something like beforehand, I think I thought of food as like some categories, but my sense of control and ownership over flavor profiles is so different, because man, when you have 10 cans of beans, you want those beans to taste really differently, which I realize this is not like the sourdough bread conversation, but
I've already had that conversation. I want to talk about beans because that is a food that I love dearly. I actually, in my 20s, during my crazy 20s, we were going to Taco Bell and I left a voicemail, and one of my friends is like, I want a bean burrito. So that'll always stay with me. But I love beans. I've been a bean fan for a long time.
They're amazing. They're amazing. I feel like
they're really good for your health. Like they lower your cholesterol. Like the more beans you eat, the longer you live. Like
totally. They do all kinds. Those insides churning, the fiber. It's really amazing. Lentil soup is another hero of the quarantine.
Yeah.
So good and so fast and so cheap. It is just, and you know, you like get like the ladling from the pot experience, which is just, you know, didn't happen before.
Do you like a brothy one, or are you more interested? Do you do the blending, or do you like a more soupy brothy?
I've been using these like red French lentils, which sort of break down. They're a little sprouted, and so and they're fancy. Like I bought them at like Lucky's supermarket. But they sort of are like half mush. They turn into like a very like, it's like a stew.
Yeah, I like the stewy. Sometimes I really want a broth, but yeah, I enjoy the stewy, like thick, like split pea soup kind of.
I feel like broth, chicken soup. Like I've made a chicken soup that was very brothy, and that was fantastic. But lentils, it's like you want more of the sludge.
Totally, that's a great way to describe it. Well, cool. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
And we will be posting your social media links below the post so people can explore the world that as you see it through photography, and keep us posted on the design MBA world.
Which is so far only in my imagination, but yes, totally. I and yeah, cool. So lovely talking to you.
Likewise, and stay safe. And I'm gonna stop recording now.